Welcome back to episode number 6 of Club Conversations. Today, we've got the awesome David Neill with us today. Again, the best project manager out there in the world, is what we should say. David, welcome to the show.
Caleb, thanks again for having me on. Really enjoyed our last conversation and looking forward definitely to this topic. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So, David, what are we talking about today?
Today, man, we're going to talk about market research. And we know this is an area, whether you're a big company, or you're a small company, you're a small business. A lot of times we can forget to do this portion of work with market research. And today, I guess we're going to talk through some of the benefits and how to go about getting the most out of researching, talking to your customer, developing segmentation, and how that can really help you work like smarter, not harder. Because that's the goal in all of this, right? Is to not have any wasted energy with what you're putting out there, right? Oh, are you there?
Technical issues. Here we go. We're back.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, no, that's 100% correct. And, I think it's really important to think about, we like to think about all these big businesses that are doing research, that they have huge budgets. They're spending millions of dollars on buyer personas and segment analysis and things like that. But I also think it's important for smaller businesses, the mom and pops, to actually think about market research within their business and how they can use it to both grow and accelerate their business. So I think it's going to be a really good topic. Now, I think it's really important for us to think about what the definition of market research is, right? So we know that we like to think like, oh, market research is understanding things. But at the core, market research it not only involves collecting and analyzing data, but it also uses that data and the information that you collected to build a target market, customers, competitors, and you're going to use that to inform your business decisions. And it's going to help businesses understand customer needs, identify market opportunities, and monitor industry trends, which, as we know, is extremely important in this time of the world right now.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of work up front, Caleb. You probably have felt this where maybe you might have a client that's willing to spend some money, right? Or you're willing to spend some money on club creative stuff, and it's you're excited, you want to get the campaign out there, or you want to put the billboards out there and all of that. But if you just take a little bit of time up front to do a little bit of market research, I think your dollar will be more effectively spent. And I think that's very, very important. Not forgetting this step before you get to all the fun stuff.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit. There's these big words, but buyer persona. In your mind, what is a buyer persona?
Yeah, I think the way that I look at buyer persona is just I don't know, like for me, they're little characters, that I always try and think about uh, that are like personifications, I guess, of people who are interested in your product. So you might have like a couple of them. I think for like a real life scenario, I used to work on this coffee company called Jot Ultra Coffee. They're still around. They're based out of Boulder. And what we discovered through our market research process is that we had like one segmentation of like stay-at-home moms that like really love this stuff, and then we also had like entrepreneurial fathers that were like super into this thing. So it was kind of funny how there was some crossover with the segmentation, but ultimately having those two um, audience audiences, it allowed us to kind of create characters to help us then better speak to and market towards each other. So we put in their pain points. We put in, what they like to do throughout their day, what gives them joy. And that was all based on, not to get too far ahead right now, Caleb, but it was all based on finding customers that fit those audience segments and taking the time to actually have real conversations with them, figure out what makes them tick, what brings them joy, life, their pain points in life. And I think that really helped us. We even named those characters. I forget the names, but it might have been like, Betty and Paul or something like that. I'm not sure. But creating real characters based on your customer bases, I think, really helped form like a personal connection and duty towards our customer when developing these ad campaigns and marketing lingo, all that.
Oh yeah. And it sounds silly, right? Like you think about like, well, it's just a Facebook ad. Like we just need to
Right.
run some Facebook ads, or we have a good designer. Like we could build some good designs. But at its core, like it's such a easy premise to think about, but such a hard thing for us to actually capture
Yeah.
is what makes people tick, right? You
Yeah.
you understand that there's a difference between, let's say, a stay-at-home mom in your example and the entrepreneur father, that their differences in coffee intake probably are significantly different, either whether you want to admit it or not, and their buying behavior is probably some sort of maybe a little different across the two. And so, as we know, it's important for us to understand, like, what does the buying behavior look like for each of those segments, and
Hmm.
what do they value, right? Because we like to think when we're building products or services or things like that, we like to sit here and we go, well, what do we think is going to be the best bet, or what do you think the best product is going to sell? And we can speculate all we want and say, well, we think the blue product is going to sell, or this truffle colored shirt, but we don't know if that's actually going to work or not. That's just our assumptions. And so, back to your point of listening to the customer, I think it's extremely important for us to understand what is our customer actually telling us.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty interesting, Caleb. Now that you're mentioning that, I'm remembering kind of going back to these interviews that I did on behalf of Jot, and it was really funny because although both of these two different segments were buying the same product, the reasons why were so much different. So, like for the entrepreneurial dad or the high executive, right? What was important to them was getting that jolt quickly so that their day can be as optimized as possible because they have all this stuff to accomplish. So, a lot of what we were targeting on Facebook and through email was more written from that perspective. Now, with the female segmentation, a lot of what we discovered was actually, yes, like Jot Ultra Coffee. It's like a coffee concentrate. So you put it with hot water or whatever, and it's a lot quicker, than making a pot of coffee. It might take 10 minutes to brew or whatever. But for them, the routine and having like that little moment to themselves throughout the day or in the morning before their day gets started, it was super crucial. So for them, what was important was that with Jot, they were able to save a little bit of time in that morning, have more time to themselves as part of just that ritual to get their day started, their only alone time they're going to have throughout the day, and then they can get going. So you can see how there was a little bit of a little bit nuance with how we were talking to each segment, especially with the female client is more of, yeah, like, your self-love, enjoy your ritual, get some time back to love yourself, all that. Whereas, Paul or whatever we called him, I can't remember. It was more just going after it, get this in your system. This is better than Red Bull. This is
The
better
Jocko
than,
Williams.
yeah, yeah, all that sorts of stuff. So it was pretty interesting how we learned to talk differently to our biggest customer segments just through. This isn't really anything that you find through the data, right? You figure out through the who's purchasing. Okay, like, hey, we have this age group, these people, right? But until you talk to your customer and then you see these themes start to pop up, you don't discover this.
100%. And I think it's fascinating because talking about the big businesses, I think not a lot of people realize the extent that larger businesses go to understand the behavior of their customers, right? We've
Mm-hmm.
experienced it with a couple of brands, including, let's say, Slim Chickens, where they're trying to understand like different pieces of their menu, or these other big companies. Like when I worked with Inspire Brands, they're looking at, does this thing of lettuce throw off the tomato with the, how is it just about right with the lettuce combination with the tomato and the pickle and the, the juiciness of the patty. They're looking at all these different metrics
Yes.
for one small product. And again, it's a big product, but at its core, we're talking about a hamburger, right? Or a
Yeah.
coney or triple, And so when we think about these things, it sounds so crazy, but it's like a science, and it obviously we know it works, and it's a big thing. But at the core, we have to think about, how do we build this routine? How do we listen to our customers? How do we build better decision making based on what our customers are saying through research?
Yes, yes, no doubt. And you can also be surprised at what you learn. Not necessarily things that you'd expect can come out of this research. To kind of summarize the end of this little jot story that I had is, we figured out whether it was men or women buying the product, they were so that they were raving fans, right? You've heard that term before from Malcolm Gladwell. They were such big raving fans that there was a segment of people that I spoke to and interviewed that would order extra bottles each month for the purpose of giving them away to friends, family, neighbors. And so once we saw that theme start to develop, an affiliate program started to, was birthed out of that. And I think that really helped Jot uh, get them started with the path that they're on now, which was really cool. But I know that, Caleb, you've had a lot of experience with this as well, with different businesses. Uh, I'm curious, are there any specific stories or unique findings that come to mind when you're talking about the market research that you've done for clients, and how that's enhanced what you've been able to do from the marketing perspective?
There's a lot there, right? So a couple of them that come to mind is, one, we were testing a project that was centered around burger optimization, right? So a brand was trying to optimize their burgers. They were trying to look at the patties sizes. They were trying to look at the juiciness. They were trying to
Yeah.
use different suppliers, see which one works better, different types of lettuce, different types of tomato, different types of onion. And there was over 3 different focus groups performed in 3 different markets, all with about 10 to 15 people, where it was basically a 2-hour moderation session where we were asking them questions about their usage
Wow.
behavior and what they value and what they think about when they think about the brand. And I think it's fascinating because it was quite interesting sitting behind the glass and watching these people eat their food and talk about their stories. But what's fascinating is the stories that these people associate with these
Hmm.
companies, right? So when they think about, I've previously with Sonic, hearing about how people talked about, like, when they go to Sonic, how excited their kids are to see the car hops, right? Or how it's just such a big thing. And so it's really fascinating to watch, because you think about, in any form of business, it always feels like such kind of just this monotonous thing where, hey, we do this and we deliver this product, or we deliver this
Right.
service, or we sell this thing. And you think like, oh, people buy, but there's really doesn't feel like there's a story. And so
Hmm.
what resonated most with me was listening to those stories about how families come together, or, and
Yeah.
it was quite exciting to hear and think like, there is more to this than just selling a product. Like, this is building a story and using that story to enhance people's lives. And so that's where I think at its core, that's what's fascinating about market research is, you think about, we're trying to optimize businesses, right, through market research. But if we think at its core, what we're trying to do is deliver the best product and service possible for people to optimize
Mhm.
their lives, that's going to make them want to come and purchase our product or service at its core. And
Yeah.
so, while it increases bottom and top line revenue, the other part is we're enhancing people's lives, which is really fascinating too.
Yeah, you're using market research to then craft a message that is deeper than just the utility of whatever you offer. And I think like that's also what helps, create that brand loyalty, that you're hoping to get out of uh, these market research periods, is that you can figure out how to not only sell the product, but like you said, enhance their lives, figure out what their pain points are, and be the solution, to something that could very well change or benefit their life in a substantial way.
It's fascinating. So that's my story of, I think a lot of people like to think research isn't important or these things. And so again, seeing these moments, experimenting, seeing what happens, it's also fascinating to me, which again is absolutely incredible.
Well, I
Now,
want to ask. Oh, go ahead,
no, go
Caleb.
ahead. Nope, you go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, what are some, let's get down to the brass tacks. Let's talk some practical stuff here. I'm curious, like how do you go about um, researching for, new clients or your business? Are there some things that you normally go to from to find from a metrics or numbers perspective? What do you do when you market research?
So, one of the things that we're looking at is when it comes to businesses that are trying to grow or do market research, at its core, we're trying to understand what data points do we want to know and see when it comes to what problem they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
So, at its core, like let's say a business comes to us and they're a retail business, we're trying to understand exactly what their business goals are, right? So, are they trying to just increase sales, or are they trying to establish a new product line? All these things really make a big difference. And
Yes.
so at its core, that's kind of what the first step of the process is when we think about research, when we recommend research, what are we trying to understand and what types of research are we going to understand? Because obviously if it's food, we're going to try to understand like a taste test, right? Like
Hmm.
what do people from taste or from that type of research. But if we're just looking at, how do we increase loyal fans usage of this brand, what we're probably looking at is we probably can just run an online survey to get a little bit better understanding of their behavior, ask them questions. So sometimes we're looking at qualitative, sometimes we're looking at quantitative analysis, but at its core, like we're basically trying to figure out what types of research is going to get the job done for what types of problems they're trying to solve. So that's kind of our big focus from that perspective.
I love that. Yes. And when you're working with these companies, what kind of data or how do you go about kind of finding this? What do you ask for? Or is there anything that you need to go hunting down yourself if they don't have it?
So sometimes we'll ask a business, hey, what, the biggest question we ask is what is your objective here, right? So let's say they're trying to roll out a new product line. We'll ask a couple questions about what their idea of a campaign looks like or
Hmm.
what initial data they have, things like that. And then essentially what we're trying to do from there is we're trying to take that information, we do our own little research and say like, okay, let's say it's a clothing company. What other clothing companies are rolling out things, or what types of lines are they rolling out? Because then we can understand exactly, maybe there's a trend that we're seeing, or we can look at, data out there that's, available that we can understand different buying behaviors across different things so that we can understand that when it comes to, you know, asking questions or seeing what's out there, we can kind of pair what the client wants to do in
Yeah.
addition to like what we think might be best from
Mhm.
a research perspective.
I love that. And let's talk about this. When you're looking at competition, how much time do you spend kind of auditing other competitions? And I would love for you to speak to that a little bit more granularly about kind of exactly what are some things that you truly look for that you've come across in the past in your experience when doing some competitive analysis.
Yeah. So when we're looking at it, I mean, the big thing that we're looking at is, um, from a research perspective, we typically see that usually the kind of the thought around campaigns is usually wrong, right? So we
Hmm.
see that clients usually when they think that something's going to do really well, sometimes they can be right, but most of the time they might be right in some aspect, and there's going to be some
Yeah.
aspects that they're completely off on. And so from that perspective, that's why we do a lot of front end research to understand, because sometimes these CEOs or executives, they like to think like, oh, we know our customers and we
Right.
know that they want the color green in this, this product. And what we realize is it's because they heard something else that said like green does really well, or that they should
Hmm.
try it. They saw a trend. And at its core, what we find out is, traditionally speaking, like it's completely off. That trend is dead, or it's not as popular now. And so what you find is, usually the baseline expectation of like, oh, this is going to work or this isn't, traditionally is in the wrong direction, most likely, which is really fascinating to see. We've seen it a lot where executives come to us and say, hey, we think this product or service is going to do really well. We think that this, this food product is going to do really well. we think that this direction is the right way. And again, we saw it, with a company thinking boneless wings was going to be really popular, and we found out that them rolling out boneless wings was not the right direction, and
Wow.
we needed to position in a different way. So you have all these thoughts of like what's going to work or what isn't going to work, but at its core, it's really important. This is why we ask questions, right? We ask what do they think the primary stakeholders is going to work, and then at its core, what other people are doing, and then we use that together to understand like what questions do we need to ask the customer to understand what's going to actually work and what's not going to.
I love that. And speaking of questions, like if you're talking to somebody, if there's somebody here watching this podcast, Caleb, that is going to do this for the first time, man, they're going to talk to their customer. They're going to ask their customer some questions. What are some basic ones, or just some ones that are, that they should definitely have on their clipboard to make sure that they're asking to get down into this, this hidden gem of info that can be there when you talk to your customer?
Yeah. So it's you want to keep your questions simple, right? So we want to understand every question that we ask. We want to keep it very simple. So we need to understand exactly what questions we're asking. And then at the core, we need to be very simplistic and careful about not asking too many questions, right?
Okay.
Because we like to overload them with questions, right? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How is this? And so if we think about an online survey, when we think about asking questions, it's very simple to ask a question of how do you feel about the value of X product at X price? Or, posing questions in a way that encourages them to think, right? So if X company were to offer X product or service at X price, how would you rate your perception of the quality, right? Or how would you rate your potential to visit or purchase this product, or how likely would you be to purchase this product? So at its core, it's very interesting to watch because these questions that you can ask are very simple. You can ask your customers like, what makes you enjoy shopping at blank, or what do you enjoy most about this? Like all these questions that you can ask that are very simple and easy to ask. But at the core, they get a lot of different questions answered for businesses.
Yes. And yeah, I'll throw this in here too. I always like at the end throwing in some different kind of, I guess I'd call them psychographic type of questions. I don't know, just to figure out who they are as a person a little bit more. Like I might, I've asked, what gives you joy in life? What stresses you out? What makes you happy? Those are just some basic ones, but in my market research experience in the past, you interview enough people, you're able to find some themes that can then help kind of make that messaging, like we've talked about, just even more impactful and truly resonate with your target audience.
One is amazing too, right? So a lot of people don't think like asking demographic information is pretty easy too, right? So we can ask people, what's your average household income? Or, how many kids do you have in your house? Or, understanding these questions, because like it's really important to understand, does your average household make $50,000 a year, or do they make 200,000? Because that changes your pricing model significantly. If your average person makes $30,000 a year in their household and you're trying to get them to buy a $1,000 plus product, that's probably not within their budget within a year, But if you're talking about they make $500,000 a year, $10,000 probably isn't as big of an ask as $1,000 for that demographic. So it's really interesting to understand, like to your point of the psychographics, like what makes people tick, what's their baseline data that you can use. And then what's fascinating is when you take the psychographic information that you got and you put some sort of analysis behind that in parity with the demographic information that you have. So you might find that certain income or certain male versus female, like there's a lot of differences in the way people act and the way people behave. And so it's always fascinating to see what types of customers of yours are behaving in certain ways versus others, and how that affects it in the long run.
Yeah. This is a good point that you're bringing up, because when I was working on that stuff on Jot, what was really interesting was that the thing that they talked most about with this particular segmentation, they they weren't as price conscious as maybe some other lower earning demographics would be. And so the biggest selling point, like it would make no sense for us to come out there with a bunch of campaigns that are talking about, oh, save money. You can, there's a sale here, sale that. Here's actually how much money you save buying Jot compared to going to the store and buying ground coffee, every week or whatever. None of that's going to really resonate with them. You know what did is hearing people's testimonials about the quality is right up there with some of this other stuff that might be interpreted as premium or a little bit more pricey, but man, this is right there and you can make it right at home. And that it was that messaging that I think really helped Jot continue to grow out of that. But yeah, it was getting rid of or moving away from all the price conscious stuff, because that didn't resonate nearly as much as the people feeling like, man, I'm getting something that's really high quality here.
100%. Well, if you think about it, right? So one company I love is Ritual. I don't know if you've heard of them, but vitamin company. And another one is AG1, right? So AG1, if you look at their cost per serving, it's actually it's pretty high for what they're offering, right? They give you greens, but you're looking at like, I think it's like $2 or $3 per serving, right? So you're asking someone to spend $2 or $3 per day just to drink something, which if you look at pricing though, which is fascinating, it's actually still cheaper than most green drinks that you get. And so
Wow.
they've figured out the way that their messaging is centered around X amount per day versus, like what the other competitors cost. And same thing with Ritual, right? So they break it down as this is like $1 per day that you're spending on your health. And so that's where, if you know that your customers are maybe a little bit more price sensitive, making it easy for them to understand like the cost of goods for them per day or per month or per week. It's always fascinating to see. So I think just benchmarking off of what you built, I think there's so many different ways that you can use all of this data to inform better decision making, which is always so good.
Yes, I love that. And I got a question for you too, Caleb, for anybody that is trying to collect more information about their customer. Are there some things that you would suggest that they do, whether they're the CMO at a place or they're a small business owner? What are some simple steps that they can take to just start to learn more about their customer, get some of that data? And yeah, because quantitative and qualitative data, it's best used in conjunction together with each other. So yeah, curious your ideas or suggestions there.
Yeah, so Baseline SurveyMonkey is a really great platform, right? Because it's a survey platform that you can ask questions, you can collect data, you can collect responses. Really intuitive platform, pretty affordable for all types of businesses. They have enterprise, they have small business packages. The big thing with that is basically creating the survey through SurveyMonkey that you can send to past and current customers, maybe a different survey for each. But SurveyMonkey is a great tool to start out with because you can ask questions, collect data, and use that, and they break it down in a very easy way to see like percentages or amount of people that respond a certain way. So that's step one, right? Is SurveyMonkey. Now, step two is if you're looking at more website behavior, really great app out there called Hotjar that actually tracks all of your website usage. So you can actually track like heat maps on where people click, where they go, which is really important and really fascinating to see. Now, if someone's looking to understand more of like the information that you can't receive from just asking on a survey, the biggest thing that I tell people is whether you're in a sales organization or if you're even in a retail business, every business traditionally has some sort of CRM or platform that manages their customer data. What you need to do is you need to encourage your people to have realistic conversations with your customers and build and collect information that they're just telling you on a daily basis that you can use to build a better experience. And what I always like to talk about is, have we talked about the red napkin theory in this yet?
No.
Okay. So I don't know the original creator of the red napkin theory, but essentially what it is a business, a restaurant, the first time that someone comes in, they ask them, right, is this your first time? And they go, yes. They sit down at this restaurant, and when they sit down, the server puts down a red napkin for them, right? So they sit down, they have a red napkin. what that does is it signifies that this is their first experience. And so they're extremely, they're given the best experience possible. There's always a story that the chef comes out and asks how the meal was and whether they, whatever. As they're leaving, they hand them a postcard or a coupon that says, come back for your second time and get a free cheesecake or whatever that looks like, right? So now that serves as indication number 2 that that's their second visit back. And we know that within 3 visits traditionally for a business, if you can have someone come back 3 times, they're now what's considered a pretty lifeline customer, unless you do something to burn their trust, right?
Wow.
So you do this 3 times to where they have incredible experiences. And obviously you want to keep up the experience past visit 3, right? We don't want to like not pay attention to them, but they've had exceptional experiences past all three that now anytime they come visit, they're telling their friends and family. Now, the same thing can be applied to retail establishments, to other businesses, where when you're having a conversation and it's just you and a customer in a store and they're, going through the, let's say through like the racks, the clothing racks, and they're whatever, posing questions, like whether they're from around locally or if they're visiting or, getting information about like their family. And again, you want to be careful about like, okay, so what's your husband's name? What's your kid's name? Like you don't want to come across as creepy,
work?
but
yeah,
what do you do for work? Yeah. Where do you work? Where do you live? But it's really fascinating because a lot of, if you look at the small town businesses that do really well, it's because they have this personal relationship built with their customers. And so it always feels like you're coming in and you're talking to the owner, you're talking to the people that work there. And when you can have a really positive experience and they understand, hey, they have 3 kids named XXX. And anytime they come in, we're going to ask like how X's soccer game was the other day. Yeah. Or we knew that there was a surgery coming up, did the surgery go, like little things like that make a big difference. And so all that being said, wrapping that back, one of the most important things that people can do is in conversations that you're having with clients, with customers, just figure out ways that you can understand without these platforms of what drives your customer behavior and what makes a big difference.
Going back to, you talked about surveys, sending out surveys. Do you encourage or ever consider like attaching like some sort of incentive for customers with those things? Curious your opinion on that.
For sure. And it depends on the businesses. If a business can give 1,000 people $5 and $5,000 isn't a lot for them, that's great. Yeah. Sometimes businesses go like, we want to spend $25 and you go, okay, like we can do a drawing. So for a business that's a little bit more lean, you can incentivize them by either giving them some sort of discount or incentive where, hey, get 25% off your next visit, or get into a drawing for a $100 gift card, or for, whatever that looks like. Now, traditionally speaking, in the research world, normally if you're sending out surveys, you're providing some sort of incentive to those people. Normally it's in the form of a gift card or in some sort of payment. Usually you're looking at anywhere from $5 to $25 per survey, depending on how long it is. And so, if you're surveying more customers, you can find ways to do giveaways or give gift cards. But then if we're looking at like a non-loyal population, you're going to struggle to get form fills unless there's some sort of a incentive attached to it, unless they're very responsive, like it's a small town or something like that.
That's very helpful. Very helpful. Caleb, I'm trying to think, is there any other things that if you're starting out market researching for the first time that we forgot to mention? I'm trying to think
I think
right
the
now.
most important part, right, as we're concluding here, I think the 3 main things that I always encourage people to think about is there are 3 common pitfalls that we see clients going into, right? So the first one being they rely solely on assumptions. So the problem here is that businesses sometimes rely on their assumptions about their audience, but they don't validate those assumptions through research. So you might think, well, like, this shirt sells out all the time, or this drink always sells out all the time. But there might be a reason behind it than what you're thinking. And so the solution here is you need to back up those strategies with solid data from research, not just gut feelings. Now, the second one is using biased data, right? So this is a very big one when we see that companies that aren't as familiar with research or they want very tight results, we find that they conduct research that's either skewed or not representative of your audience, which obviously leads to flawed strategies. And the biggest piece of this, right, is if we're launching a new product and we're trying to steal share from, X company, but we're only recruiting or getting research from our current customers,
Mm-hmm.
that, hey, what do you think about this company versus our company? If they're loyal customers, you're basically giving yourself skewed results that you're the best company out there and no one else cares.
Right.
So that's a big pitfall. And then the third one is, a lot of people like to ignore the research results, right? Sometimes research comes back and it does not tell us what we want, or
No.
it's the complete opposite direction. And so our encouragement here is, we like to ensure people to make a commitment to use the research results to inform decisions, and to continuously review and revisit that data to use productive decision making versus what they want to hear. And so I'd say those are the most common pitfalls that we're seeing in research right now for businesses, that, as we wrap up, I think are really important for us to identify and encourage people to avoid those common pitfalls.
Yeah, yeah. To me, what I hear there is just remain curious and adventurous, and yeah, understand there are new possibilities out there when it comes to your customer base. And I think if you keep that curious spirit in you, I think you'll find some really interesting new opportunities to grow your business that wouldn't have come without that curiosity, don't you say?
Exactly. Always try to find more information about your customer every single day.
I love it. Well, Kayla, I appreciate you having me on to have this conversation. I think that this was quite wonderful.
Great conversation, David. As always, thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed this conversation and you want more information, what do they need to do, David?
Hey, you need to smash that like. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, subscribe. That's going to help and grow this channel, and find us on Spotify and our club conversations as well. So, and of course, guys, we want to hear your thoughts. Let us know any questions that you guys have, and maybe we could do a follow-up or a mailbag answering some of your questions. So please engage with us. We'll be keeping tabs on what y'all are needing, because we want to listen to you guys. We want to put this into practice and listen to our audience as well.
I like it, David. Well, that's the conclusion of episode 6, the importance of market research and developing marketing strategies. Your host, Caleb Roach, and you have David Neill. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next week.